Morbid Facts. In 1955, 24-year-old actor James Dean died in a car crash while driving his Porsche 550 Spider, which he nicknamed Little Bastard. After the accident, the car was towed to a garage in Los Angeles, and while it was being repaired, it fell off its jack and crushed a mechanic's legs. The engine and transmission were later sold to two professional racers, both of whom later crashed their vehicles during the same race and were seriously injured. The car's tires were also sold, and the new owner was eventually killed in yet another car crash. Over time, the stories of deaths and injuries associated with the car led to rumors of a curse. Some believed that the car was haunted and that anyone who came into contact with it would suffer misfortune. But in 1960, the car disappeared while being transported from Miami to Los Angeles. The car has never been found, and its whereabouts remain a mystery to this day. Prior to filming The Dark Knight, Heath Ledger locked himself in a hotel room and talked to only himself for 6 straight weeks. He said this helped him land more in the realm of a psychopath to prepare for his iconic role as the Joker. Many believe this extreme dedication was partially responsible for his accidental overdose on sleeping pills the next year. In 2020, a Florida man was arrested for allegedly sticking his hands in peanut butter and punching his neighbor who was allergic to nuts. If Barbie were a real person, she wouldn't be capable of lifting her own head and would have to walk on all fours due to her proportions. She would be severely anorexic and suffer from chronic diarrhea due to only having room for a few inches of intestines and half a liver. In 2013, a Brazilian woman confessed to lacing her cooter with poison so that her husband would die after going down on her. In 2006, 51-year-old Susan Walters was attacked by a hitman whom her husband had hired to kill her. But after finding out who sent him, she ended up killing him with her bare hands. Gordon Ramsay's father was a violent alcoholic who regularly abused he and his mother. One of his favorite things to do was to call Gordon a gay little boy because cooking was for poofs. He became so aggressive at times that Gordon and his mom often feared for their lives while at home. In 2017, a 9 weeks pregnant Brazilian woman suffered a stroke and was declared legally dead. Although doctors said the babies had no hope for survival, the brain-dead woman was kept alive for 123 days before delivering a healthy pair of twins. After growing up with a chronically bloated stomach, Sanju Bhagat went to the ER in 2006 with severe abdominal pain and difficulty breathing. Doctors were astonished to discover that the twin he must have absorbed in utero was still living in his abdomen and surviving off his blood supply. The half-formed twin had limbs, long fingernails, hair, and even genitalia. Doctors eventually removed the parasite and Bhagat made a full recovery. As a child star, Drew Barrymore was thrust into the dark side of Hollywood at a very young age. Her mother started bringing her to dance clubs when she was only 9 years old, letting her dance with older men and even use hard drugs. She understandably struggled to cope with this extremely early exposure to adult vices, since she was forced into a 6-month rehab program by the age of 13, and then spent the next 18 months in a mental hospital after attempting to take her own life. After a tiger escaped from a Georgia zoo and killed a man in 2015, a PSA was issued on what not to do if you ever encounter a tiger. Don't approach it, don't run away, and definitely don't urinate. In an attempt to escape a forceful arranged marriage with her cousin, 21-year-old Pakistani woman Asia Bibi poisoned a container of milk at a family party, hoping that only her fiancé would drink it. But instead, it was used by Bibi's mother-in-law to make a dessert drink for the entire family. It was then served to 27 members of Bibi's family, killing 17 of them. George Wallace was a governor of Alabama who openly supported Jim Crow and segregation. Once his term was over, he helped get his wife elected so that he could subvert his term limit and stay in office. To do so, he kept her cancer diagnosis a secret from her, knowing that the treatment would negatively affect her ability to run. Thus, the first female governor of Alabama died within 200 days of her term. Dewey the cat died in 1910, but meant enough to his owner to be honored with a gravestone that still stands 113 years later. It reads, "He was only a cat, but he was human enough to be a great comfort in hours of loneliness and pain." In 1950, herpetologist Kevin Budden caught a deadly taipan snake by hand and hitchhiked to town while holding it. At some point, he lost his grip and was bitten, but managed to bag the snake and made a random truck driver promise to get it to researchers. Kevin succumbed to the venom the next day, but the driver kept his promise, and the snake was used to create the first Taipan antivenom in history. In 2010, 80-year-old Maria de Jesus Arroyo was pronounced dead after suffering a heart attack and brought to an LA morgue. A few days later, morticians returned to pull her body from the freezer and found her corpse suddenly covered in bruises as if she was beaten up. It was later determined that she was still alive and tried to get out, breaking her nose in the process, but she eventually froze to death. In 2013, Zac Efron was running through his house with socks on when he suddenly slipped. He smashed his face into the corner of a granite fountain so hard that it shattered his jaw and nearly killed him. He was immediately knocked unconscious, and when he woke up, part of his shin was hanging off his face. In response to more recent plastic surgery rumors, Zac claimed that his cheek muscles overgrew to compensate for the muscles that were permanently damaged from that injury. Union Army soldier Jacob Miller was shot in the forehead during the Civil War. Left for dead, he somehow woke up a few hours later and lived on for another 54 years. Mac Ray Evans was a serial killer who used to work for Caltrans throughout the 1950s and 60s. He'd bury his victims, who were mostly children, in places where he would later help build the highways on top of. Many of his victims were never found and are likely still under some of the California highways that thousands of people drive over each day. For most of his life, former jock Jason Padgett believed that math was stupid and pointless. But that all changed in 2002 when he was badly beaten outside of a karaoke bar, resulting in a severe concussion. The very next day, he suddenly woke up and had miraculously become a math genius. Thanks to an extremely rare condition called acquired savant syndrome, Jason could now see the world in complex geometric shapes and fractals. Here's a 1923 photo of Russian leader Vladimir Lenin, by which point he had suffered 3 strokes and was completely mute. In 2012, Anthony Omari took a machete to the face while defending a Kenyan orphanage against attacking thieves. He saved 37 orphans, and his story helped raise over $80,000 for the orphanage. Many houses that people say are haunted have been found to contain high levels of carbon monoxide or other poisons that can cause hallucinations. This may explain why haunted houses are usually older homes, which are more likely to contain old and defective appliances. In 2021, University of Missouri student Danny Santoli was rushing to become a new member of the Phi Gamma Delta fraternity. Knowing the process was hard on him, his family urged him to back out, but he wanted to prove himself to the fraternity bros. On October 19th of that year, the fraternity held their Pledge Father reveal night, which would end up going down as one of the worst hazing disasters in American history. Along with the other pledges, Danny was blindfolded and led down to a basement where he was force-fed beer through a tube and told to finish an entire 750 of Tito's vodka. Around midnight, Danny was sitting on the couch in extreme distress with a blood alcohol level of .468, nearly 6 times the legal limit. Soon enough, Danny became unresponsive and was rushed to the hospital in cardiac arrest. He was later declared brain dead as a result of alcohol poisoning and spent the next 8 months in the hospital. He's now blind, unable to walk, talk, or do virtually anything by himself. 11 members of the frat were criminally charged for the horrific incident. In 1996, mountain climber Beck Weathers and his team attempted to scale Mount Everest. But after coming down with a bad case of snow blindness, Weathers got stuck in a severe blizzard with a wind chill of -100 degrees and soon fell into a hypothermic coma. He miraculously survived, but had to have his nose and both hands amputated as a result of severe frostbite. Nicknamed Mr. Titanic, this was the last photo taken of French diver and Titanic expert Paul-Henri Nargeolet. He saw the Titanic 37 different times before dying on his 38th trip on board OceanGate's Titan submersible. In 1986, a young Indian flight attendant named Nirja Banat was on a plane that was hijacked. The terrorists were targeting Americans, so she hid the passports of all 44 Americans on board. Instead of saving herself, she helped the other passengers escape and died while shielding 3 children from a hail of gunfire. One of those children is now a captain for a major airline and says that Banat was his #1 inspiration. This was one of the last photos captured of Steve Jobs, the genius behind Apple. It was taken just a few days before he passed away from pancreatic cancer on October 5th, 2011. During World War I, 20-year-old French soldier Albert Roche was found sleeping on duty and was sentenced to death for abandoning his post. But thankfully, a messenger arrived just moments before his execution to tell the full story. Albert had crawled for nearly 10 hours under enemy fire to rescue his wounded captain before passing out from exhaustion. In 2013, a Chinese businessman hired a hitman to take out his competitor for $282,000. But the hitman hired another hitman to do the job, offering $141,000. That man then hired another hitman, who hired another hitman, who hired another hitman. The fifth hitman, who was offered $14,000 for the job, tried convincing the target to fake his own death. But instead, he reported the threat to authorities, and all 6 men, including the original businessman, were sent to prison. In 2004, Thomas and Jackie Hawks decided to sell their 55-foot yacht to spend more time with their family. Soon enough, former Power Rangers actor Skylar Delian contacted the couple saying he was interested in purchasing. Tom and Jackie were suspicious of Skylar at first, but they became more receptive when his pregnant wife Jennifer and their other child came to the next meeting. So they agreed to take him on a test run of the boat. Skylar brought with him 2 associates who, unbeknownst to Tom and Jackie, turned out to be former convicts. Once they were on the boat, the 3 men beat Thomas and Jackie, overpowered them with tasers, tied them up, and forced Thomas to sign the yacht away to Skylar. Afterwards, they tied the couple to the boat's anchor and threw them overboard to drown. Their bodies were never recovered. Days afterwards, Delian tried to empty the couple's bank account, but the entire plot was soon foiled when the accomplices confessed to the heinous murders. Thankfully, Skylar and Jennifer Delian will now spend the rest of their lives rotting away in prison. As a child, Robert Downey Jr. was always surrounded by drugs. His father introduced him to marijuana when he was only 6 years old and allowed him to start drinking once he turned 8. By the time he became a teenager, Robert had already been addicted to cocaine, heroin, and prescription pills. RDJ struggled with these demons for more than 30 years before finally deciding to turn his life around in 2003. This was the last photo taken of Semra Aysel before she was pushed off the cliff by her husband Hakan. The pregnant 31-year-old fell for more than 1,000 feet and died immediately along with her unborn child. In 2013, an 8-year-old girl found the lifeless bodies of her parents, brother, and grandmother in her basement. They were apparently poisoned by highly toxic gas emitting from rotten potatoes after going down one by one to check on the person who went down before them. The only reason the girl didn't die was because her grandma must have left the door open before dying, allowing the gas to dissipate. One day in the summer of 1984, James Huberty told his wife Etna that he believed he was developing a mental health problem. 2 days later, he asked for an appointment at a San Diego mental health clinic. But the call was logged as a non-crisis since Huberty sounded very polite and stated that he'd never experienced any mental health issues in the past, so he didn't receive a call back that day. The next morning, while at the San Diego Zoo with his family, Huberty told his wife that his life was effectively over. Referring to the clinic's failure to return his phone call, he said society had their chance. Upon returning home, he leaned toward his wife and said, "I want to kiss you goodbye. I'm going hunting for humans." While holding a gun across his shoulder walking out the door, Huberty told his daughter Zelia, "Goodbye, I won't be back." He then drove to the parking lot of a McDonald's near his home and opened fire. James fatally shot 21 people and wounded 19 others before being killed by a police sniper 77 minutes later. To lose a third of his body weight for his role in The Machinist, where he weighed 120 pounds, Christian Bale pushed his body to extreme limits, consuming nothing but coffee, a can of tuna, and a single apple every day. His goal was to reach 100 pounds before producers had to stop him so that he wouldn't die, and the movie ended up being a total flop. He then had to regain 100 pounds in 6 months to star in Batman Begins, but then had to lose 30 pounds again before filming because he'd bulked too much. In 1996, 7-year-old Jessica Dubroff tried to fly an airplane across the United States but crashed during a thunderstorm. This resulted in a law banning children from flying. In 1987, Andy the Goose was born without feet, so his owner eventually fitted him with Nike sneakers to help him walk, turning him into a famous role model for disabled kids. But one day in 1991, Andy disappeared from home and was found in a local park the next day with his wings and head ripped off. Police were able to identify the killer but didn't reveal their identity to the public. Woody Harrelson's father, Charles, was a professional hitman who once assassinated a federal judge. He was even accused of being involved in the JFK assassination in 1963. A Russian man who tried to rob a hair salon ended up being the victim when the female shop owner overpowered him. She tied him up naked and ended up using him as her sex slave for several days. 21-year-old Japanese woman Nakano Takiko was one of the last remaining samurai warriors. When she was fatally wounded during the Battle of Aizu in 1868, she asked her sister to cut off her head so that her enemies couldn't take it as a trophy. BTK killer Dennis Rader used to install security systems for homeowners. Many of his clients wanted the security systems to prevent the BTK killer from ever entering their homes, unaware that he was the very person installing them. In the 17th century, Lazarus Colorado was convicted of murder and sentenced to death, but he was later pardoned over a strange technicality thanks to his parasitic twin. Lazarus argued that the death would kill his twin, who was innocent. A jury agreed and the man was released. In 1977, Muhammad Ali endured quite the beating in his 15-round fight with Ernie Shavers, one of the hardest-hitting boxers in history. Ali suffered so much brain damage that his speaking rate was permanently slowed down by 16% after the fight. Geoffrey Hudson was a courtier for King Charles I of England who was only 18 inches tall. After being insulted by an average-sized man in 1644, Geoffrey challenged him to a duel with pistols. His opponent came to the duel only armed with a water gun as a joke. But Hudson didn't take too kindly to this and fatally shot him in the forehead with a real gun. During a drug-fueled rampage in 2001, the Prince of Nepal killed 9 members of his family, including the King and Queen, at Kathmandu's National Palace. The prince then turned the gun on himself in an attempt to take his own life, then fell into a coma. As heir to the throne, the crown prince escaped any charges and was instead declared King of Nepal, but he only reigned for 3 days in the hospital before being declared brain dead and unfit to serve. According to a 2014 investigation, the car that Paul Walker died in had tires that were 9 years old. This likely contributed to Paul's racer friend losing control while driving around a corner at 93 miles per hour. It's a tragic example of why you should always change your tires after 6 years no matter how much they've been used. Roughly 200 people die on cruise ships each year, especially on those that carry a lot of seniors. So most ships have a small morgue on board prepared to store up to 10 bodies. In 2002, 13-year-old hockey fan Brittany Cecil was sitting in the stands of a Blue Jackets game when a deflected puck struck her in the temple, fracturing her skull. She died just 2 days before her birthday and remains the only fan fatality in NHL history. In 1991, actor Phil Lewis, who played Mr. Mosby on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, collided head-on with another car in Maryland while driving drunk. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison for vehicular manslaughter when the 21-year-old woman he collided with died. Momcilo Gavrich of the Serbian army was the youngest soldier to have fought in World War I. He was able to join at the age of 7 after his whole family was killed by Austro-Hungarian soldiers. Mary and Margaret Gibb were a famous pair of conjoined twins who traveled with Barnum and Bailey in the 1930s. In 1966, it was discovered that Margaret had bladder cancer, but the two adamantly refused to be separated. The next year, Margaret died and Mary followed 2 minutes later, both at the age of 55. In 2021, Corinna Smith discovered that her husband had sexually assaulted her children when they were younger. In response, she filled a bucket with boiling sugar water and dumped it on him while he was asleep, leading to his incredibly painful death. Here are some morbid facts about shark attacks. In 2015, a man swimming near Huntington Beach, California was suddenly struck in the back by a great white. After making it ashore and going to the hospital, doctors assured him that he'd be okay. But upon seeing his x-rays, they realized he had a cancerous tumor that they were just barely able to remove in time. In 1993, a surfer named John Doyle was attacked by a great white shark off the coast of West Africa. He made it to shore unable to walk, only to be mauled by a pride of lions on his way to the hospital. More than 250 stitches later, he survived both attacks and made a full recovery. In 2001, an 8-year-old boy was attacked by a 7-foot bull shark while standing in knee-deep water near Pensacola, Florida. The shark had bitten off one of the boy's arms before his uncle pulled it away and wrestled it to shore. After a park ranger shot the shark in the head, the boy's uncle retrieved the severed arm, put it on ice, and drove it to the hospital where it was successfully reattached. These are some items purchased at yard sales that ended up being way more valuable than anyone knew. A woman named Claire bought a card table for $25 at a garage sale because she thought it looked nice. 30 years later, she found out that it was one of only 6 tables in the world made by furniture makers John Seymour and Son. She flipped it at an auction for $540,000. In 1987, a British woman purchased a costume ring from a yard sale for $5, only to find out 30 years later that it was actually a genuine 26-carat diamond ring worth $960,000. In 2014, a scrap metal dealer from California bought a golden egg for $14,000 at a yard sale, hoping he could flip it for a quick profit. But after finding out the metal was worth far less than he was hoping for, he decided to take it to an antiques expert instead. It turned out to be an extremely rare Fabergé egg that once belonged to the Emperor of Russia, worth an estimated $33 million. In the year 2000, Rick Norsegian was looking to buy a barber chair at a garage sale, but ended up buying 2 boxes of old photos for $45. 4 years later, he discovered that the boxes contained 65 glass plate negatives from famous photographer Ansel Adams, worth right around $200 million. Here are some morbidly wholesome facts about dads. In 2015, a Texas father saved his son's life when doctors wrongly declared him brain dead and wanted to take him off life support. He barricaded the hospital with a gun and had a 3-hour standoff with a SWAT team until his son squeezed his hand. His son went on to make a full recovery. This awesome dad got a tattoo of his son's cancer surgery scar to show him that there's nothing to be ashamed of. In 2012, a Texas father beat his 5-year-old daughter's molester to death. But a grand jury declined to indict the man because they decided that he was justified in using deadly force to protect his daughter. This amazing father designed some shoes to give his paralyzed daughter the sensation of walking for the first time. A gay man from Italy named Luca Trapanese adopted a baby girl with Down syndrome after more than 20 families rejected her. Being a single gay man, he was told by social services that he would only be given a child with an illness or disability. He was later quoted saying, "When I first held her in my arms, I was overcome with joy and felt that she was my daughter right away." Insane coincidences. A woman from Utah gave birth to 3 kids on 3 consecutive leap days, February 29th of 2004, 2008, and 2012. The odds of this happening are about 1 in 3.2 billion. In 2004, a pine tree was planted in LA to honor former Beatles member George Harrison, but it died 10 years later after being overwhelmed by an infestation of beetles. Jeremy Rodale was a longevity expert who popularized the term organic food. While filming an interview for the Dick Cavett Show at the age of 72, he said, "I've never felt better in my life and have decided to live to 100. But just minutes after saying this, Rodale died of a heart attack while still being filmed. In 1983, 22-year-old Michael Anderson Godwin was sentenced to death by electric chair after brutally murdering a young woman in South Carolina. But the electrocution ruling was later overturned and Godwin was only handed a life sentence. A few years later, he was sitting on his prison toilet trying to connect his headphones to the TV when he bit down on the wire and was electrocuted to death. In 2019, a man was using Google Earth to check out his old neighborhood when he stumbled upon something spooky. A car containing the remains of a man who had been missing for 22 years. 40-year-old William Moult was reported missing in 1997 when he failed to return home after leaving a nightclub. 70 years ago, the United States learned about Joseph Stalin's death when a 21-year-old Air Force staff sergeant intercepted a coded message from Russia. That sergeant was none other than singer-songwriter Johnny Cash. In 2013, Margaret Arobio bought a Powerball ticket with random numbers and won the $360 million jackpot, or so she thought. The next day, she saw a media report claiming that nobody had won the jackpot yet. When she called the place where she bought the ticket from, they told her that she bought it an hour after the numbers were drawn. In 1996, a man's body floated up to a boat in the UK seas. There was no identification on the body except for a 25-year-old Rolex Oyster on his wrist. Since Rolex maintained such meticulous service records, they were able to identify the victim and ultimately his killer. While filming for Blade Trinity, Jessica Biel was instructed to shoot an arrow at the camera that was more than 60 feet away. It was protected by plexiglass except for a 2x2-inch square in front of the lens, which Beale unexpectedly managed to hit with a direct bullseye, thus destroying the $300,000 camera. During the Crimean War over 160 years ago, a French and Russian soldier fired at each other and their bullets collided. Just hours after the death of Nintendo CEO Satoru Iwata, a rainbow appeared over the Nintendo headquarters. Fans dubbed it the Rainbow Road to Heaven. Diana Ross, who sang Ain't No Mountain High Enough, lost her husband in a mountain climbing accident. In 2015, a dying fisherman told his two buddies to use his ashes as bait mix. 3 weeks after he died, his friends used his ashes to reel in this 180-pound monster carp, one of the largest ever caught. In 2004, grandmother Dorothy Fletcher suddenly suffered a heart attack on her flight to Florida. When the stewardess asked if there was a doctor on board, 15 people immediately stood up. It was a group of heart doctors on their way to a cardiology conference. Proof that animals are evolving. A killer whale off the coast of Washington once started the trend of wearing a dead salmon on its head. Other orcas in the pod started doing it too, and soon enough other pods in the area had picked up on the fad. The behavior had faded by the next summer, making it one of the first cultural trends ever observed in nature. Here's an amazing video of a rat using a stick to set off a trap so that it can safely snag a treat. As a result of all the rats we've killed with traps over the centuries, we've basically forced them to start evolving toward the usage of tools. This thoughtful otter at a Chinese aquarium is more helpful and productive than most people you'll ever work with. This is just one example of why otters are said to be one of the smartest animals in the water. That's adorable. The U.S. Navy's Marine Mammals program has started teaching California sea lions how to play video games. The program has trained over 100 sea lions and dolphins in underwater tasks that they can perform better than humans. These games seek to improve not only their cognitive function, but also their mental health and happiness, since they genuinely enjoy playing them. The dumbest ways to die. This photo was taken at a zoo in India just moments before this white tiger dragged this man into his den and mauled him to death. The man apparently climbed up the fence to get a better view of the tiger, but ended up slipping and falling into the cage. Flat earther and daredevil Mike Hughes died in 2020 after crash landing his rocket he made to prove that the earth is actually flat. In 2011, 3 teenagers from Utah stood on some train tracks to take a selfie next to a passing train. But they didn't hear the second train coming from the other direction, and all 3 were killed almost instantly. In 2011, a New York man died while riding his motorcycle at a helmet law protest. Medical experts said the only reason he died was because he wasn't wearing a helmet. In 2022, personal trainer Tom Mansfield accidentally overdosed on caffeine. He apparently miscalculated the amount of powder he needed and drank the equivalent of 200 cups of coffee in one. In 1996, a New Orleans man tied a sausage around his leg with a rubber band and wore skinny jeans to appear as though he was packing. While he was having the time of his life at a nightclub, the rubber band caused a blood clot which traveled to his brain and killed him. In 2014, Kentucky pastor Jamie Coots was handling a rattlesnake during a church service when he was suddenly bitten. But instead of going to the hospital, Coots simply went home believing that God would save him. An ambulance was later sent to Jamie's home by concerned churchgoers, but his wife declined medical treatment despite her husband falling unconscious, and the pastor later died. In 2019, a Florida man thought it would be fun to drop large pieces of concrete from an overpass onto a highway below. He found the biggest one he could lift with rebar sticking out of it and dragged it to the edge of the overpass. As he was pushing it over, some rebar caught his pants, pulling him over the edge and right into oncoming traffic. Artifact porn. This carved ivory model of an eye was used to help teach students the anatomy of the eyeball in the 1800s. It can be unscrewed from its base to show the different parts of the eye, including the cornea, pupil, and iris. Here's a 2,000-year-old jade burial suit from the Han Dynasty of China. All 3,200 of the jade tiles were stitched together using thin gold wire. Here's a nearly complete carnix from 100 BC that was found in France in 2004. Made in the shape of a snarling boar, it was a horn used by the Iron Age Celts to intimidate their enemies in battle. This was the great bathtub of ancient Roman Emperor Nero. Made of porphyry, it can be found in the Vatican museums of Rome. A Viking skull was found in Dorset, England, with lined grooves in its teeth. They were likely dyed red to frighten opponents in battle. This is the original marble throne of Charlemagne as it can be found in Aachen, Germany. Between the years 790 and 1531, it served as the coronation throne for 31 kings of Germany. Oldest things in the world. In 1890, some Russian gold miners discovered a 9-foot-tall totem pole in a peat bog. Dating back 12,000 years, it's the oldest known wooden sculpture in the world. The world's oldest pair of pants is a 3,300-year-old pair of wool trousers discovered in a Chinese cemetery. In the small village of Nashdafan, Iran, some of the oldest windmills in the world still spin. Made from natural clay, straw, and wood, the windmills have been milling grain for over 1,000 years.